Alhaitham will eliminate all your enemies, and today I'm gonna tell you how to build him best. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. So what artifacts does this feeble scholar use to gain all that muscle? His favorite proteins come from 4-piece Gilded Dreams. Easily Alhaitham's highest damaging set within his best comps. The usual team structure within Alhaitham teams is Dendro, Hydro, Electro, Dendro. So usually you'll be getting 14% attack and 100 EM consistently from the 4-piece. In teams like Yagravate with 3 Dendros, that's 28% attack and 50 EM. No matter which way you stir it, he gets valuable buffs from the 4 set, with the EM being extremely beneficial as most of Alhaitham's damage comes from reactions, not to mention his EM scaling. Also, have a look at his A4. The 2 set giving a flat 80 EM is also incredible because of this. 4-piece Deepwood Memories can work on him too, but acknowledge that it's gonna be a lot weaker on him compared to Gilded. But it is a choice for teams such as Alhaitham Double Hydro, where he is the main Dendro driver in a team with himself, 2 Hydros, and an Electro trigger. Or if you're running Alhaitham as a replacement for an on-healed Nahida. Weaker, but works, so worth mentioning in my opinion. For those wondering, yes, 4-piece main Ace Hunter works in playing Alhaitham with Farina. The HP loss does allow him to take advantage of the crit rate buffs, but in my opinion, it's stronger to get a good crit ratio on 4-piece Gilded Dreams than it is to get a bunch of free crit. But it's a viable and cheap option for those of you who've been farming Mayo to death and still need to reap out Gilded pieces. And, as copium as it is, 4-piece Golden Troop can work. A lot of Alhaitham's damage comes from his skill, and the 2-piece gives you 20% extra skill damage. Not only that, but the 4-piece can bump that up to 45%. Unfortunately, you won't get the full 70% as Alhaitham's an on-fielder, but for the 2 seconds after he takes the field, if you're fast enough, maybe he can get in a single hit with the 70% buff. Either way, a little cope compared to the others I've already mentioned. As for 2-piece mix and match sets, any combo of 2-piece Dendro percent, 2-piece EM, 2-piece skill percent, and 2-piece NA percent will all serve you fine. Use them as placeholders until you can snatch a full 4-piece set. As for main stats, simple. Go for EM, damage percent, crit percent. I've already discussed why EM is so valuable on Alhaitham. Attack percent can be a fine placeholder, sure, but even his talent scalings want a large share of EM. Not to mention his A4's damage increase, so really try and get EM as soon as you can. As for substats, simple. Go for this. Getting that delicious EM is very valuable for this guy. He eats it for breakfast. In terms of crit breakpoints, Alhaitham ascends with Dendro damage percent instead of crit stats. So his breakpoints on a non-crit weapon will actually be 70 to 140, and with the crit weapon, 70 plus to 200 plus. The more the better, but don't neglect other stats. I'm gonna recommend Gilded Dreams above all else, but all of the sets are so resin efficient that I'll say just use whatever ends up having the best substats for you. In terms of bursting every rotation, have a look to see his ER requirements in all of his viable teams. Try and get those amounts of ER if you want to burst every rotation. This is valuable because his burst gives him free mirrors, which equals more uptime, aka more damage. Alhaitham possesses 2 weapons at his disposal, his house keys and his swords. Personally, I think the keys are enough of a weapon, but if you want to know his best swords, well, R1 Foliar Incision is without a doubt his best in slot option. All the stats he needs are here, and the passive is tailor-made to his kit. The only flaw with Foliar is that it has a maximum amount of trigger counts, which could easily cap out an AoE, making Foliar fare better against bosses. Outside of that, Foliar is pretty much solid and worth getting if you're an Alhaitham simp, reasonably so. Look at him. That wants the best performance out of him. Next up is Primordial Jade Cutter. Jade mentioned? I love this weapon on Alhaitham, great crit rate stats, and most important of all, an unconditional passive. Alhaitham doesn't build HP, but if we assume he has about 20,000 HP on a regular build, he would still get a 240 flat attack buff at R1. Plus, yours would have more because of the added on 20% HP. Since the passive is unconditional, the trigger counts don't matter, as this buff continues to persist in AoE, so while Foliar is best overall, this is my personal favorite Alhaitham pick. Wolf's Fang is also a new Battle Pass weapon that's entered the arena, being a pretty powerful contender for Alhaitham's weapons. This is especially amazing at higher refinements. It directly increases his skill and burst damage and grants some crit buffs. This is without a doubt Alhaitham's best 4-star weapon. But fret not, free-to-plays, Alhaitham is a super cheap character to get hitting the ground running, and this is proven by how good the 3-star choice Harbinger of Dawn is on him. It is equal performance to Mist-Splitter, which is crazy, and is super easy to R5. The only sad part is how conditional it is, meaning you either have to be a dodging god, or have a consistent source of healing in your team. Plus, this choice is unviable when playing with Farina due to her HP drain. This weapon is best served in a comp of Alhaitham, Yelan or Xingqiu, Raiden, and Baizhu. For free-to-plays we want choices that are unconditional. Craftable Iron Sting and previous event weapon of the Umbrella are here to save the day. Good and viable picks for sure, with plenty of EM to boot. Iron Sting can also be refined for free, and its passive is pretty nice for Alhaitham. Splendor of Tranquil Waters unironically works for an Alhaitham playing with Farina in his team. He gets the skill damage, and he gets the large crit. But why are you not using this weapon on Farina? I mean, I get it if she's on Vestering or Pipe, but the logic here is just silly. Regardless, yes, it works. You can use Freedom Sworn for the EM, but I'm gonna be honest, I don't like this weapon on Alhaitham. The EM is the only thing it's got going for it, and literally any other EM-based choice is better. Other 5-star options like Miss Butter Reforged and Uraku Misuguri work too, with Uraku actually having some skill damage buffs, which is nice. But I don't like them since they work a lot better on their respective units, half of their passives can't even be triggered by Alhaitham, looking at you, Misuguri, and it's kind of lame that they get so easily beaten out by 4-star and even 3-star weapon options. Though I will say that Misuguri is more worth it over Mistbutter thanks to the combination of a skill increase and the crit stick. So if you're gonna pull a 5-star sword for Alhaitham, make it Foliar or Jade. For those wondering how good Cloran's new sword fares on Alhaitham, it's decent. The stat sticks are nice and the crit damage is cool, but he can't really trigger the Bond of Life-based mechanics on the weapon. The weapon banner of his 4.7 season is very Alhaitham friendly, so if you want the 5-star weapon, now's your time to pounce. Otherwise, Sting and Harbinger are fine. Giga Chad over here needs a hype squad. Who's it gonna be? Well, none other than the Quick Bloomers. Hell yeah. The team consists of a Alhaitham, a Hydro, an Electro, and a Dendro at the end. The Hydro can be Farina to provide lots of damage bonus percent and sub DPS. Also, her lower Hydro application is perfect for the Quick Bloom reaction. Her main flaw is that she does not buff transformative reactions, and Dendro cores are transformative. So, her buffing only applies to the team's raw damage, not the Hyper Bloom cores. Yelan can also be played very comfortably with Alhaitham with lots of sub DPS and enough Hydro application for quick blooms once again. The main difference between her and Farina is that her damage bonus is tied to her ramping A4, and having a team-wide healer is not as much of a requirement. Xingqiu works as well if you're free to play, though his qualities lie more in defensive utility. He has some mild self-heals and also damage reduction. His Hydro application is higher than the previous two, so expect there to be more Hyper Bloom cores granted in this team variant. When it comes to the Electro squad, you have two choices. Elemental Mastery Raiden or Kuke Shinobu. You avoid Fischl in any core-related team because all is a single target and its application usually does not land on Dendro cores. Raiden on EM is great. She has extremely long uptime and a super wide AoE with her skill, making her the most comfortable of the quick bloom triggers. Not to mention that she gives an elemental burst damage bonus based on the burst cost of each character in the team, so for example, Yelan would have 70 and Nihida would have 50, which is especially nice if you're using Yelan in your quick bloom comp. Kuke Shinobu is excellent because she has split EM HP scaling, so building EM naturally benefits her kit. She has a bunch of Electro application in her burst, not to mention solid healing if you're using a Farina variant Alhaitham comp, or if you're just interested in having a decent healer. The only thing I don't like about Kuke is that her healing isn't team-wide, but it's good enough and she brings plenty of other qualities, so this shouldn't be a deal breaker. In terms of Dendro units, there's two major choices: Nihida and Baiju. Nihida provides cold, hard buffing, and tons of Dendro application as well. Her burst that's tied to her A1 can give Alhaitham plenty of EM that he so desperately needs, and as the premier Dendro unit being the Archon of Sumeru, the buffing she provides is unparalleled. Easily the strongest pick in Alhaitham teams. Plus you can put her on Prototype Amber if you feel like you lack some team healing and need it. As for Baiju, the ultimate comfort pick. Don't worry about Dendro application because Alhaitham with free mirrors up has equal Dendro application to Nihida. He has some buffing for Dendro teams within his kit, and has a super comfy shield with huge heals that works super well in Farina variant Alhaitham comps. Excellent Dendro unit, and isn't even that bad of a loss over using Nihida damage-wise. Example teams include Alhaitham, Farina, Kuke Shinobu, Nihida. Alhaitham, Yelan, Raiden Shogun, Nihida. Alhaitham, Farina, Raiden Shogun, Baiju. Total free-to-plays can also play Alhaitham, Xingqiu, Kuke Shinobu, and Dendro main character, or Fischl instead if you're okay with Alhaitham wearing Deepwood and being the comp's driver. Alhaitham does have other comps outside of the legendary Quick Bloom. For example, Yai Gravate Alhaitham. You can go for Alhaitham, Fischl, Yai, and either Baiju for comfort or Nihida for more damage. Either will work very well. You can also go for Alhaitham, Yai, Nihida, and Baiju. Zhongli can replace Baiju as he does have a 20% res tread universally, but Baiju's Dendro buffing is preferable. This has a rather long split rotation but does solid DPS. Yai won't be bursting every rotation though, keep that in mind. You get a ton of value out of all the units in this team. You can also opt to use Fischl over Yai, who has the benefits of much less field time, a lot more energy gen, and the ability to reposition herself. Bloom cores are also very, very good with Alhaitham. The man, the myth, the legend pairs well with Nilou, and then the core continues with a Hydro and then a Dendro. The Hydro can either be Kokomi, as she can build herself on full EM on sac frags for powerful Bloom Madness, and her Jellyfish Hydro AoE. I like Kokomi here as she actually benefits from being in a Bloom team, as her kit lends itself well to it. Farina can work as well, but my issue is that Farina only buffs herself in Bloom teams. She doesn't buff the Dendro Bountiful cores at all, but it works. Yulan can also fit in here as she can add some single target presence to Bloom teams. Examples include Alhaitham, Nilou, Yulan, Baiju. Alhaitham, Nilou, Kokomi, Nihida. Alhaitham, Nilou, Xingqiu, Baiju. I don't like Yao Yao as a healer here as she has to be on field, and sadly Kaveh literally nerfs Bloom, so no, he's not worth using with Alhaitham. Plus they're both on-fielders, so it was never meant to be. You can also opt to play Alhaitham, Hydro, Electro with Alhaitham as a team's Dendro driver, but then remember to put him on 4-piece Deep Wood memories. He will work in literally any Dendro team you can slot him into. Quick Bloom? Yeah. Nilou Bountiful Cores? Sure. Yigravate? Absolutely. Pokemon? Hell no. Grass types suck. Alright, time for his training arc. To be honest, Alhaitham looks like he's had about 15 training arcs. Ito skipped leg day for sure in comparison. Anyways, combos. If you want him to have full mirror uptime in one rotation, go for Q, and 3D, and 3E, and 3D, and 3C, and 3D, and 3. And if you want his split rotation, if you're playing Yigravate for example, then go for Q, and 3D, and 3D, and 3D, refresh supports, hold E, plunge, and 3D, and 3D, and 3D. Then rinse and repeat for both. Those should serve you in all scenarios across all of Flickerman's best teams. Alhaitham is a very talented man. Dude is the temporary leader of his country, has a massive brain, and is a super strong DPS, all while giving the vibes of someone who watches YouTube shorts 23 hours a day. He used the other hour to be in this video. As for his talent in combat, strap in, I'll tell you all about him. His normals just deal 5 basic strings of physical damage. They will come in handy later though, as they can infuse with Dendro. What's important to understand about Alhaitham's kit is mirrors. He can have up to 3 at once, and each mirror lasts its own amount of time before disappearing. The goal of his kit is to have 3 mirrors up at all times, if not as much time as possible. His skill will give him 2 of these mirrors. You can press or hold it. If you press it, he lunges forward and gains these 2 mirrors. You could see how many mirrors you have at one time by looking to his left, assuming his back is facing you. If you hold, he will still only gain 2 mirrors, but you can aim where he will go. Kaching and Chiori can do the same thing. Except for Alhaitham, you actually want to take advantage of the fact that he can do this because you want to aim his skill on the floor, then plunge down for the most optimal damage possible. You can also use his skill for other goofy techniques, like stunning the Eon Blight Drake the way Kaching does. Though note that he only gives you 2 mirrors if you have none already. If you already have 2 mirrors or 1, his skill only gives you 1 more mirror. And when you have even a single mirror up, Alhaitham's basics get converted into Dendro damage, and these mirrors will unleash a projection attack based on how many mirrors you have up with him. These protection attacks are considered skill damage and would be buffed by something like Golden Troop. The interval for each mirror's removal is 4 seconds at a time. As for his burst, its main quality is how it gives you 3 mirrors immediately, so you always want to start off with it, but if you already have mirrors when you cast his burst, those get consumed to make the burst deal more damage depending on how many mirrors you have up. You also get less mirrors from his burst if you already had some. For example, if you had 1 mirror already, you only get 2 from his burst as that previous one got consumed. It's also just a fairly nice source of damage for him. As for Ascension passives, simple. His A1 gives you a mirror every time you do a charged or plunging attack with him once every 12 seconds. This is part of why you want to plunge with his skill. As for his A4, for every bit of EM that Alhaitham has, his burst and projection damage gets increased by 0.1% for every point of EM he has until the buff reaches 100%. Really solid A4 and emphasizes building EM on him. As for talent priorities, simple. Go for this. All of his talents are important, so don't ignore any of them, but focus on that skill since those projection attacks are where the majority of his damage share comes from. If you want to preserve resources, I'd say 8, 9, 8 is a safe stopping point, or just triple crown him, like I did, since he's a king that deserves that. Alhaitham is housing a guy who's in chronic debt right now. Wouldn't living with Alhaitham be the dream? Then why not also join Kaveh in his chronic debt? Let's talk Constellations. This is okay. I really wouldn't go for this in particular on its own, as it doesn't really change Alhaitham's rotations that much. Leave it be, not worth it on its own. This isn't a bad buff for him and is actually pretty nice for his own damage, but for a C2, honestly it's kinda mid. This should have been a C1. You can get way more valuable C2s out there. This upgrades Alhaitham's skill by +3, which actually cooks pretty hard, but once again not worth getting on its own. Besides, most damage comes from reaction, so extra talents isn't all that necessary. A good boost to him and his teammates, but once again not worth a C4. C4s usually suck though, and this is not bad for one. Except Xiao, he's got the best C4 ever, true. Increasing his burst level by +3 is alright. Get it on the way to C6, otherwise ignore this nerd of a con. This is a pretty solid C6, and although I think other C6s like Arla or Nuves are better, that doesn't make this bad. Unfortunate that you have to wade through a bunch of garbage to get here. I'd say if you want your Owl to do more damage, get Nahita's C2 first, as it is a bigger increase for him over his own C2. Also, consider getting Primordial Jade Cutter or Foliar, then Farina or Yolan cons. Then you can look into getting Owl cons. It's understandable that you'd want your handsome Chad to be as strong as possible, but spend responsibly and know what to go for first. Alhaitham is the Chad of all time, with extreme prowess over the Dendro meta and still the best Dendro DPS to this day, not to mention the coolest looking Sumeru character. I absolutely adore this guy's kit and wholeheartedly recommend him to you all. Great in all scenarios with unfathomable ability to adapt to literally any situation ever. I remember seeing him for the first time in the Sumeru reveal trailer and knowing that he'd be my favorite out of the Sumeru cast. Awesome freaking character, dude. I will glaze him to the very end. Hopefully this video was able to get your Alhaitham in the mindset of the process of elimination. This has been Juice, signing out. And, you might have to leave this video through the window or fireplace or something. Alhaitham took the keys again. The front door is locked.